Okay, welcome everyone to this very special episode of our podcast here at Experience House. My name is Amit Patel. I'm the founder and the creative director. We are here in New York. I'm super buzzed about this particular episode, and I get the fantastic opportunity to speak to Talia today. Talia, thank you so much for arranging this. I'm just going to say, first of all, thank you so much for our friendship and getting to work with you over the last couple of years. Just tell us, how's your week been so far?
Well, technically we're in Jersey City.
Jersey City.
So important to remember. I get reminded of that a lot whenever I say we're in New York. We're like, no, we're in New Jersey. How's my week been so far? I bought a house. I put an offer on a house.
Congratulations.
My first house. That was really exciting. My birthday's on Friday.
Happy
I've
birthday.
gotten to spend the week with you and our product team here at DTCC. Thinking about how do we bring design thinking into everything we do and doing a big training. So it's only Tuesday, and it's been a good week so far, I think.
Yeah, amazing. So to set the scene, it would be great just to hear more about you, your work, what do you do here. So just give us, maybe start with a little bit about your background, a bit about your journey to where you are today, and then you can tell us about what you do here at DTCC.
I started my career at JP Morgan, so I've always been in financial services, and I have always really loved product. I think I didn't know what product was when I started. I ended up joining JP Morgan because I studied abroad in South Africa, and there were a lot of students and friends who I made who went to a university where everyone did what they called OCR, on-campus recruiting. And in on-campus recruiting, you basically go to the college counselor's office. I don't know if it still works this way, but you go to the college counselor's office and you give them your resume, and then you can do interviews at a bunch of different places where they like your resume. So I did interviews at 3 places. One, there was no chance I was ever gonna get a job there. The second, I was 45 minutes late to the interview because I took a cab. I went to school uptown in New York, and I took a cab and didn't know that there would be traffic at 9 a.m. like on a Tuesday or whatever it was. And then the third one, thankfully, they came on campus, so I didn't have to go downtown, so we didn't have the cab issue. And I ended up getting an offer for a summer internship at JP Morgan and learned how to do effectively like the back end of SharePoint. Right. At the time, which was like
I've done my time with SharePoint.
I think everyone has done their time. If you've worked in financial services, you've done your time with SharePoint. And actually recently was looking through old notebooks, and I found my first notebook, and the whole first 2 pages are SharePoint commands. So I did an internship there, got an offer, and started at JP Morgan. I did a rotational program. I'm a big proponent of rotational training programs. Got to experience it at JP. It was cross-line of business, cross-functional, so did a lot of different things. And then had an amazing manager, and who's now a mentor and friend. And he realized I was kind of good at the computer stuff. And as a kid, I was always interested in computers. I made my parents buy me that. It's not called a MacBook back then, but the Apple computer that had the base with the moving neck monitor. Yeah. And I remember learning how to use iMovie, which was pretty technical at the time. My first job was making bar and bat mitzvah montage videos, a very unique niche, if you're aware of that. And then, my manager at the time, he was named David, realized I was really good at this stuff, and he was like, "You get systems. Let's rock." So, worked on that, and then spent a bunch of time working on just different kind of system migration, system implementation, system design, and then got into the blockchain and crypto space. Spent 5 years as the product lead at BNY for digital assets, which was, I like to say, the career journey of a lifetime. Right. And then had the opportunity to join DTCC about a year next week, and get into the wealth space, which is really different than what I've had the opportunity to do, and very different than the institutional side in a lot of different ways. It feels much more tangible in a different way. I've always thought about the user, but this brings the user to fore in a different way, and I've kind of loved every second of it since I joined last year.
Nice. Okay, so you talked about a few different pillars there. You've talked about training programs, you talked about systems and systems thinking. I want to start with, my first question is as you've kind of progressed in your career of, say, the last 10 or 12 years, what have you seen in terms of the changes of the workforce and the workforce readiness, and how the challenges that they might be facing in today's kind of financial industry?
Yeah, it's a big question and a great question. I think as we think about workforce, I really like to spend time with our early career talent wherever I've worked. A lot of places will call that, junior talent, but I don't like the distinction between like junior and senior. I think everybody has like insights and things to teach us, no matter how much experience they have. I love spending time with the early career talent folks because they're so energized and curious. And if you can, I've had such an interesting and amazing career in this industry by being curious. So, my first role, I remember, the guy I mentioned, David, his boss at the time came from London. I remember I must have been like 2 weeks into working, and his boss showed up unannounced from London. We were doing a system migration, and it wasn't going very well. And he showed up from London, and this man was very scary at the time. Like being a 22-year-old, he was really scary. And I actually quote him all the time now, but I remember he showed up and he took me into a conference room and he said to me, "I want you to have a proper job." Right. And I hadn't had that much experience with working with British people at the time. And I don't think I even knew what the word proper probably meant at that point. He said, "I want you to have a proper job." And I was like, okay. And something was going wrong with the system migration. He said, "I want you to book a train to Delaware by tomorrow morning and go down to Delaware." And I was like, okay, like, what does that mean? Why am I going to Delaware? Because the operations people were there. And I remember sitting with them. And again, I think I probably still have this in some notebook somewhere, like the flows of like, how is their job working? Right. And being able to see what they were doing. And I remember showing up like with muffins. I think I'd made muffins the night before. It's always my trick, like bring food wherever you're going.
I've never had any of that, by the way.
Okay, maybe next time you're here. I don't have such time these days. But like I remember bringing muffins like in a Ziploc bag, which is so funny at the time. I don't know now. I feel like people are too like post-COVID too like germy. Right. I'm not sure if I could bring muffins in a Ziploc. And I remember sitting there and being like, oh my God, like this is done via fax, this is done via email, like what are they doing? And we ended up figuring out the problem that was going on from me being there and sitting next to them, which was that, if I remember correctly, like things were happening on the old system, because we were doing system migration. On the old system, they were event driven, meaning you'd send in a file and then the event would kick off. And if I remember correctly, it was about like margin calls. And in the new system, everything was time-based. So if you had different clients around the world, the margin calls weren't going out at the right times because there was a whole different way of doing it on the new system. And the thing about that was that like I had the curiosity to go, like I didn't decide to go sit there. I had an amazing person who I worked for who was like, go think about the user. But sitting there and being able to see like, oh wow, this is so interesting and this is so complicated, and how do I think about not only the operations user in this scenario, but also the client, and what is the point of why these margin calls are being issued, and what is the point of this system, and how do we make sense of that? I think it just created for me this like deep curiosity, both about the operations and how it's done, and the systems and the products and all of that, but also about the people doing it. Yep. And I think, again, the reason I'm so energized by spending time with early career talent, to your question about the workforce, is that I've just had an amazing career and gotten to like see the world and meet really interesting people, and in the context of building products and improving our financial system. But also I think it's an amazing industry and space to get into that people wouldn't necessarily know. So if you can light that spark and create curiosity for people, I think that's a really big thing. On the other side of that, I've had the opportunity to learn from really amazing people, and people who spent decades, dedicating their lives in many ways to this industry, and going through crises and improving the system and thinking about how it runs every day. And like, there's an end user at the end of that that's just like me or you, trying to get a mortgage or investing in a stock or buying a fund. And when we think about how do we bring that all together and put the user so central to that, it's a really powerful opportunity. And the people who really understand that, and the people who are earlier in their career, bringing that together, I think there's a real magic there. And I think, we talk a lot about AI and how that's going to change the workforce. Like a robot's not going to replicate that magic. Right. And I think as we think about AI as an enabler, for me, it's really important. How do we keep the human aspect really central to that?
Okay. So we met each other about 2 years ago, I think, when you were at BNY. We did a bunch of design thinking stuff, and we've kind of stayed in touch. And we obviously have started doing a program here. I would love to explore, because you kind of talked about, the different actors, the different systems, having to sit and shadow people. At what point did you realize actually this design thinking is a thing we need to bring and make it more prominent, either for the workforce or as a training program? What was the spark for you that made you realize this is the way that we need to be getting our people and teams to be thinking?
So two things. I was introduced to design thinking while I was doing my MBA part-time at Duke. We had a professor, so I was doing my MBA at Duke, and the program was structured in that you did basically like a week or two in different locations around the world, and then Saturday virtual classes in between. So we had spent a couple weeks in Durham at Duke, like learning accounting, which was brutal. Not my strong suit.
It's a nice campus.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
The accounting was a lot more time inside than outside. And then we went to China in October 2019, Peru in January, and then in January 2020, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And they had to pivot the program. They asked a couple students if they would help with like the design, the curriculum.
Right.
So I got to know one of the professors, and I believe he brought in someone from IDEO to
yeah.
effectively think about how do we do design thinking around how would COVID affect like global business, which was a kind of brilliant like curriculum exercise to think about. And I was really interested in that. And I remember an exercise very vividly that we did where everyone had to design what would the front page of a newspaper in, I can't remember what year, like X years later. And I love, like I'm pretty artistic and I love that. So I really enjoyed that. And I was like really turned on to the design thinking stuff. Fast forward a few years, when I was leading the product team at BNY, I'd like to think that it was my idea, but it wasn't. I always am an honest person, so I'll give credit. And I remember my boss at the time we were talking about it, and she was like, I want the whole team trained on design thinking.
Right.
And I was like, okay, where do I start with that? And actually a woman who worked for me in London gave me a proposal of a couple different firms, and you're based in London, and she found you, and I said to her, I was like, which one would you pick if you were me? And she said, Experience House, and kind of the rest is history, and you're kind of like a celeb in my product life and my worlds.
Yeah. Well, I think for us, we started to realize probably about 18 months ago that design thinking, and I think we talked a lot about process reimagination, but what's clearly coming to life, even like in today's workshop, and what the teams are working on today is service design, right? Thinking about, to your point, the different actors, their experience that you're trying to design for them, either it's a customer or a client, but also then what's needed behind the scenes from a systems thinking perspective. So I think there's always been arguments about design thinking, like the relevance of it and how does it come into play in different industries and sectors. But I think the mindset, and going back to your thing around curiosity, I'm a huge believer of that. In fact, from our B2C business, I'm starting to see the difference between those who have that curiosity and who don't, and starting to see where they're going to kind of fall into place in tomorrow's workforce, right? So I think that curiosity, the design thinking, the service design, that special blend is becoming more and more important.
Yep.
And so if I was to ask you now, in terms of the teams that you've seen go through it, what would you say has been some of the sparks, the differences that you've seen?
Oh my goodness. So I'll start by saying like the days that I've been doing training with you it's probably at this point, we've probably done like 16 days of training together.
Yeah.
Ish. And I feel so excited when I get to work with a team to bring them on this journey through design thinking. I think in financial services, a lot of times we're very constrained to the rules, the regulations, how we do things, or there's a perception of constraint. And I think what design thinking and service blueprints and service delivery and how we think about all of this end to end, what it really allows is you to come outside of that box and just have a space to say, like, if there were no constraints, what would I do? Then you overlay the constraints as you get towards further down the line in that. And I think it really enables people to like come out of themselves and come out of what they do every day. A, it allows people to bond. Like when you give people a problem. B, it kind of sparks that curiosity naturally, because I think one of the exercises we did last month with you was how would you design an airport for various different personas, and like the spark of people getting energized about this and then saying, okay, how could I apply this if I wanted to enable like 401k rollovers, or how would I apply this to ETF share classes, or how would I apply this to private markets? I think people oftentimes think that like the work, back to the curiosity and the like level of imagination that can be brought to this, I think people oftentimes think, oh, it can't be that interesting. You know, it's interesting on a certain level, but it can't be that like energizing and exciting.
Right.
And I think what design thinking allows is you to come out of yourself and think in that way. Some moments I love a whiteboard. I love colorful markers. I love like doing all of that. So I think the moments that like stick out in my mind, my core memories of all the design thinking trainings we've done together are really seeing people together on a whiteboard, getting people who might sit on different parts of the floor or are in different teams who, you know, I've never seen talk to each other ever, start to bond over this. Again, it pulls people out of themselves. And then the most exciting moments are when you leave and I see the teams in a room like using the maps that we've given them, using that, or facilitating a workshop with a client, or even talking to like the legal team. Like, there's nothing more that I love than doing like a design thinking workshop with lawyers, because they're always like, this isn't how we do things. And I'm like, no, I know, but like, see it. And, you know, it takes a while for them to get comfortable with the tools and whatever. And then we get to the end of it and they're like, wow, so much came out of that. And we're thinking about, and I'm thinking about as a leader, what are the different ways we can bring that in? So we did something last week where I created a Miro board, or I think it was Miro or Zoom whiteboard. And we just had some prompt questions after a 3-hour workshop we did with the client. And instead of everyone sending an email, it created a space for us to do that. And then we came to the call prepared because everyone had reviewed the thoughts.
Right. And I think, again, just going back to some of the challenges, or, you know, where people might think where design thinking doesn't necessarily fit into this industry or to the types of work that you're doing. There's obviously a huge amount of SME knowledge. There's no doubt about that, right? I've seen it in lots of the organizations that we've worked with. There's sometimes talking with people that have had 10, 15, 20 years of deep domain expertise in that particular area of work that they're doing, and now they're being asked to kind of rethink utopia or rethink what North Star could look like. I'm exploring this thing around unlearning, like having to kind of break away, and you've kind of touched upon it a little bit, like having to break away from the normal ways of doing things and having to step back, relearn, or say, I'm actually okay with unlearning how I've done things and then relearn a new way, because it's going to be more aligned with what needs to be happening in terms of competitive threats or new technologies, et cetera. So I just want to get your thoughts on that, like, and what challenges you've seen around that, and any kind of approaches that you may have tried or seen in terms of that unlearning type of thing.
There's an aspect of the unlearning where you need someone to like facilitate and coach through that. And I almost think the role of a manager in this new world is changing. And I think that, like, I almost view myself as more of a, like, from a leadership perspective, like more as a like facilitator and coach. Right. And like my subject matter expertise is generally less than many of the folks who work for me.
Right.
And I think sometimes leaders could get really uncomfortable with that. But what I've tried to do is say, how can I facilitate the best way to like do better for the market and do better for the client with the amazing expertise and experience that the people in my orbit have. And what that means is that a lot of times I have to ask questions, and sometimes people get really frustrated where I'll be like, why are we doing that? Why, you know, I don't know if this is an official term, but my old boss used to call it like the toddler 5 whys. And you know, why do we do it that way? Why do we do that? To get to the root cause, or why do they want that? Why do they want that? Why do they want that? And I think when you ask those probing questions, you get to a better answer than just, here's why we're doing, here's what they asked, here's what they told us. But when you ask about that experience, you can come at it from a really different perspective. In terms of, I think like specifically to the unlearning point, it's very uncomfortable, I think, a lot of times for people to do this. Yeah. So you have to create a space where it's fun. Yep. You know, I like to say, if like we're not having fun, why are we doing it? We spend, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Working on problem solving. It should be fun at a minimum. And so if you don't make it fun, you're not, like, no one's going to want to do it in the first place. Like I said, always bring good food. And creating, again, like a safe environment where people feel comfortable asking questions. And in a leadership position, I find I can do that by like asking the, you know, quote, like dumb question, which I fundamentally don't think like anyone should be embarrassed by asking those questions. And if I'm doing my job right, people should feel comfortable asking that, because sometimes the person who has the least experience in the room asks the question to the person who has the most subject matter expertise that they wouldn't have been asked before. Then I'm actually finding that some of the power unlock with the AI tools is that it'll give you an insight and it'll spark some other idea that like human intelligence has. And you can thread that together to develop a stronger story.
Right. And to your point, exactly the airport example, I think we've always been a big fan or kind of used in our kind of as a mechanism for training is that let's spend a couple of days breaking away completely from what you do day to day. So we'll bring in something like a hotel or airport experience where everyone's got a good sense of like what the stages are, but allows them to just separate and get external inspiration and stimulus to kind of
it makes them realize like, hey, building an airport or building a hotel or I know your experience with like trains and stuff like that, like it's actually not that different from how do I develop a solution for an ETF share class, or how do I develop a private markets identifier, or how do I do all these different things that may seem so like esoteric in comparison, but actually you need to bring the same forms of design, especially in a world where it's so digital. We all have computers, our whole lives are digital. Like our customers and our clients are expecting, and in some ways like demanding the same level of service from what we're building for them than they are, you know, on your Instagram app.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So in terms of like looking forward, say the next 3 to 5 years, we don't need to go too far into the future. What are now some of the skills, and I think it's, you know, I've worked with some of the kind of the early careers, the team that you have here, and they're phenomenal. What do you think over the next 3 to 5 years are some of those skills, or human, or I don't like to call them soft skills. I think it's like human skills or kind of social skills, whatever you want to call them, that are going to become more and more prominent, especially because as AI starts to become more of an orchestration layer for a lot of the work that could be happening.
I think the biggest thing, no matter where you are in your career, and this is something I think about all the time, is how can you be as low ego as possible?
Interesting.
And I think that's whether you have 1 year experience, whether you have 15 years experience, whether you're 40 years experience, we live in a world where information is so accessible that I think historically information has been much less accessible, and the person with the most information was able, you know, to win in some ways. We're kind of democratizing access to information in a way that we've never seen before. And that's both really scary for people and really powerful and really exciting. And I think if you accept that it's all three of those things at the same time, we can have a conversation about how do we leverage it in the right ways. And I think if we all come to this saying, like, this is scary, this is changing how we operate, this is changing how we work, we can then create solutions and products and services that help us with, you know, creating a agentic workforce, creating more task management, and people can do those pieces of work that really do require that human connection. Because I don't think that's going away 3, 5, 20 years from now. Like, we're all human beings at the end of the day. Some of the work that the tools can do and that are going to change the way we operate, like, I don't enjoy doing today, right? And I don't think anyone really enjoys doing that. So I think in the 3 to 5 year range, I think number one on the skills, attributes, qualities, whatever you want to call it, like, low ego.
Low ego, yep.
And I think people don't really understand what, like, ego often means. I have an amazing coach who, the first thing she said to me is, like, you need to let go of your ego. And I'm like, I don't have an ego, like, screw you. And then I realized, like, the ego comes up in every interaction we have. And it's not a bad thing or a good thing, it's just, it's an ego. So if you can kind of let that go, it's powerful. I think the second thing is communication skills, written and verbal, presentation,
storytelling.
Like, you have to get people interested in what you're talking about. That's really big. And I'll go back again to, like, curiosity about the new tools, curiosity about the people you work with, curiosity about the domain you're working in, curiosity about the people you're serving, the communities, and all of that. I think those three pieces together will enable us to really, like, deepen and create more meaningful work. And I think I'm really excited that I don't think that's a conversation we're having all the time about the AI stuff, but I think that it actually, in some ways, is going to enable us to actually have a more meaningful
Right.
day.
Yeah. And I do want to just quickly touch upon the AI stuff because, like you said, access to information is, and everyone has it. It's not like that certain people have it. Everyone has access to the same information. We can execute and build things quicker than ever, and that's only going to get, improve over the next couple of years, no doubt. I mean, the leaps we've seen with Anthropic and Claude over the last couple of months, especially in the last week with Claude Design.
I like that. Exactly. I tell everyone there's a funny. I think you had told me about like Lovable, and I was on a flight, and a friend was also on a flight, and I think they were going, like they're flying to Asia or something from New York, which is obviously a very long flight, and I was like, I wonder if there's a way you could create an app to track a flight and like customize it.
Yeah.
So while I was also flying somewhere, like while I'm sitting on the tarmac, I created an application that could track flights.
Yeah.
And you could customize what emoji you wanted on the flight and what colors you wanted.
Yeah.
And Lovable like suggested to me, if you want a map thing, go get this API key.
Yeah.
So I'm literally like on a tarmac at JFK creating this tool, and I sent it to a friend, and they were like, what world are we living in that like you just created an app and have like a map already embedded in it? And it wasn't perfect, and I didn't like deploy the software, but I was like, how cool that I could have a map that is tracking someone in the sky with like a fun emoji, which that's not like a huge use case. Yeah. But that was probably the first thing I built using AI that I was like, wow. And as I consider myself a pretty technical person, and that for me just kind of blew my mind away because you could see the code and you could see, like, it was so cool.
Yeah. So to that point, now if you start to bring that into an environment like this, or the financial industries where you've got the opportunity to execute quicker than ever or build concepts quicker than ever, where do you see the value as a skill of problem framing coming into all of this? Because I could see that there's a lot of different opportunities. I've seen it over the last couple of days as we're exploring them with your team, as they apply the learning. All of a sudden, it's like, how do you spot the right opportunities and the problems? How do you frame them the right way to be able to build a coalition or a team to go after them and help you with your positioning as an organization?
It's a really good question. Honestly, like I don't know if I know the answer to that one. I think that the more time I spend with the AI tools, the more I see opportunity for where it can help. The real unlock, though, is it has to be connected to the data. So, our teams here that are working on the AI tooling are incredible, and I'm in awe of how they've done an amazing job bringing us access. Yeah. And I think we're farther ahead on this than perhaps we sometimes give ourselves credit for. But how is it going to help us solve problems? I think it's about us asking the right questions. And
what is the right problem?
And what is the right problem to be solving?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think we get that right with like human intelligence all the time. So how we use the tools in order to frame the question for the question almost, I think is a prompt. Like I know you've been spending time talking to the team. I came downstairs yesterday and they were all like kind of mind blown, and I was like, "What were you guys doing?" And they were like, "Oh, we just spent an hour and a half with Amit, like talking about AI." And I was like, "Okay, keep on keeping on. I don't want to interrupt the flow." They were very deep in the flow, but I think the more you use it, the more you see there's opportunity. I think there was like a big piece by Jack Dorsey a couple weeks ago about like the future of the workforce and how does it look with access to information. It's just changed. Like it really changes, but then we have to retrain ourselves of how to ask questions and what questions should we be asking and where and what are those inputs.
Yeah, I think the problem framing and understanding the right challenges and the right problems to go after in terms of like where you want to be positioning from a strategic perspective for your organization just becomes more and more important because again, execution is becoming so much quicker.
Yep.
The need to do that identify the right problem, that discovery work through design thinking becomes so much more important.
I think pattern recognition, like I probably shouldn't be saying this like publicly, but my mom, in my kindergarten class, my mom tells this story about how the teacher, Mrs. Mintz, who was my and all my sisters' kindergarten teacher, said to my mom in the like parent-teacher conference or something like, she's exceptionally good at recognizing patterns.
Right.
And my mother likes to say, oh, maybe she'll be an interior designer. And then with my middle sister, my mom says in the parent-teacher conferences, they said to her, she's not as good as recognizing problems. And my mom likes to say, I didn't know what that meant. I thought, okay,
Yeah.
Haley won't be an interior designer.
Yeah.
So when we talk about like skill sets, like
Yeah.
pattern recognition is so huge. And what I'm like, because I am kind of obsessed with pattern recognition, and you know, when you find like, you're like, oh, this thing looks like that thing. How could we create a system that does those two things where historically we've done them separate? And how can we decrease costs but also create a better product?
Yeah.
How can we think about like connecting these two people who on the surface might not be interested? So like, I love that level of pattern recognition. The AI tools are just unbelievable at recognizing patterns. So for me, I'm like, oh my God, like I can recognize like a little pattern, and then I feed something into it with information, and it recognizes like massive trends, and that just like unlocks so much then conversation and connection for how we can better serve the market. And I'm like, we do a lot around, we're thinking about how do we think about anomaly detection and other things, especially for the role that DTCC plays in the market.
I want to end this. I'm just going to try and summarize everything and then kind of leave you with one last question. So we've talked about training programs, the power of design thinking. You talked about pattern recognition, what AI can and cannot do, problem framing, building business cases, helping you with strategic opportunities, the placement of where DTCC should be in the future as well. I know that through our training that we've done with you, that storytelling has been a big part of this. So we have the teams today working through building service blueprints on how they're going to orchestrate this kind of new service offering and understanding how to kind of pitch that. And they've had their storytelling training over the last time and that we were here, plus today. So I want to end with one final question: the importance of storytelling, and how have you seen that shift, say over the last 10 or 5 to 10 years, and the importance that it has inside your teams, and in terms of the value that you have for it?
I love stories. I love, as you can probably tell, asking questions, like human connection. I think in some ways like patterns. Stories are patterns. Patterns are stories. I had this memory a couple days ago where I was thinking about like when I was a kid, my this is probably kind of weird. My grandmother used to tell. When my grandmother was in town, she lived in Chicago and I grew up in Boston, and I would always ask her to tell me a story whenever she was in town. Like my parents never did this, but when she was in town, I insisted that she tell me a story as I was going to bed. And she would always tell a story of when my mom was born. That was always my requested story of when my mom was born, and my great-grandmother came to the hospital and cried because she thought my mom was so ugly because she didn't have any hair. And I think about a lot just like the stories that make up our lives, the stories that we tell. And again, like we spend 10 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is, like a day at the office. Like how do you make that meaningful for people? How do you make them realize the impact that they're having? We love stories. Like that's we're obsessed, like a world, and humans are built on these stories, and this creates connection. I think our whole lives are made up of storytelling, both in like, okay, I was going to say point to point, but like human to human connection, in the way we consume media now, in the way we consume social media. And what we do all day is no different than that. And we are improving the way that the markets operate, and there's a big story to be told there on a macro level. And then on a micro level, storytelling is so important for getting funding, getting investment. I think as, the AI tools make it easier, I can write my app on the airplane, like that means that'll change the way software is developed and designed. So you have to make a case in a different way for why you need resources. And I think it makes it meaningful, and I think it gets people excited, and it sparks that curiosity to say, like, I want to know more. And I think in many ways, I'm really lucky for our friendship that you've taught me the importance of that. And people always are hating on like PowerPoints, and I actually think like I'm a big PowerPoint fan, and I've also gotten into the like Jeff Bezos 6-page memo, Amazon 6-page memo idea. And I love both of those. Those are different mediums for telling stories.
Yep.
And I think I actually love PowerPoints because it's a way to tell a story. And it's a medium that we use to tell stories in certain industries.
Yeah.
And that might evolve and change. I got a demo the other day from a company, I think it's called Mainstage, that is helping founders of companies tell their stories to get investors in a different way. So they're creating pitches instead of a deck. They're using like a video format, and then they can track who they're working with. It's really cool, and like founded by an artistic team. So there's a visual aspect of it. And these are all just different mediums to tell stories. But foundationally, you have to have that story. You have to understand that story. You have to understand the need, and then it becomes powerful in a different way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have a friend of mine who, his name's Aaron Cooper. He was actually, I met him through, the power of networking is unbelievable. I met him through somebody who I'd met who was a potential student at a conference that I was speaking at in India. Found out that she was working as a sneaker designer that was mentored by a group of people at Nike, and one of those mentors was somebody named Aaron, who has become a good friend of mine, and he was actually... He designed all the famous 90s Nike basketball shoes. And I was like, this is, and like for Serena Williams, et cetera. And he talks about stories that matter. And as you were speaking there, you're right, like we could use stories in so many different ways. But again, going back to problem framing and what matters inside an organization like this, what are the right stories? And how do you choose the right stories? And when do you tell them to build a business case? I think that's something that I think has become undervalued, is the power of storytelling in building business cases. And to that point, we talked about design thinking and service design, and obviously we've got the whole realm of AI. Storytelling is now becoming one of our biggest asks as well. Like everyone's asking about how do we do it? How do we kind of build our own frameworks? How do we get our teams?
If it's meaningful, like people want to get out of bed in the morning and come do it. And I say that to people all the time. Like if you're not excited to get out of bed and come do this, then it's not right for you. And that's okay. Like it's not, like every job is not for everyone, but it's on me as a leader and a manager, or as what am I rebranding myself as, a coach and facilitator, to make that meaningful. And you do that through storytelling. And that needs to happen through like everybody. That's to how do you recruit people? How do you get funding for a new business? How do you retain talent? These are how do you make your brand something that people want to work with? I spend a lot of time with our brand team, and I'm learning a lot about storytelling from them. But it can be meaningful. I don't think it always has to be like value accretive. I think there's a meaningful part of it.
Perfect. Okay, last thing to close everything off. You talked about your role as a facilitator, as a coach. You're no doubt going to continue building teams over the next, say, 3 to 5 years and more. What are 3 words that come to your mind about what's exciting you about the next 3 to 5 years about building teams? It can be a sentence or it can be 3 words, whatever.
3 words, okay. I was told you were going to ask questions that I wasn't prepared for. 3 words. Energized, intentional. Very good, I think teams are only as good as the intention that you put into building them, and investment. I think the workforce is changing, and the market is evolving, and investment could look like many different things, but I think all of us are going to have to invest both in ourselves as these changes happen, and then in, to use your line, like the storytelling on why it matters and what the future looks like. And to your point, that conversation we had about AI yesterday with some of your team was after the session. We just sat there for an hour just talking about the power of Claude, and that to me is like a personal investment in time to build that curiosity as well. Amazing. Well, thank you for doing that. Well, no, thank you so much for having us here in Jersey City. Once again, just a super a couple of days. The hospitality, as usual, is amazing. Great snacks. We have good snacks here. Exactly. And I'm trying to stay away from them this time. There is a soda. Have you been introduced to the soda machine? No. Oh, okay. I'll have to show you that later. That's the best perk of this office. Perfect. We'll go there after this. All right, Talia, thank you so much. Thank you, Amit. This was great. Thank you.